Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Alien versus Predator Galaxy podcast, the original Alien and Predator podcast. This is Aaron Percival, aka Corporal Hicks, and joining me, as always, is my fellow squad mate,
Adam Zeller, aka RidgeTop.
And we have a nice special, a great interview for you for this episode. Who are we talking to, Adam?
We are talking to the primary writer of Aliens Dark Descent, the video game that was recently released a couple months back at this point, right? July? So,
yeah. So the lead writer and the narrative designer, two roles he occupied for the game, and he's Thibaut Claudel. So this is, of course, when we're recording this, we've already spoke to him. I've already edited it. We're just doing the in and outs, ready for the final episode, and it was very much a enjoyable recording, wasn't it? You really enjoyed this, didn't you?
Yeah, the story for the game was really interesting, so it was great to talk to the writer. I was wrong, by the way. It came out in June. Man, I need to play that game again. I feel like
I've been replaying it. I started playing it through again on hard.
Yeah. You might notice the background behind me will look different once the video kicks on, and that is because I have moved. So we recorded this a little while ago at this point, but we're glad you can finally check it out. Really enjoyed this discussion again. So,
indeed, should we let it play? Should we let everybody listen to Thibaut instead of us?
Yep, let's do it.
So first, welcome to the podcast, Thibaut. It's a pleasure to have you join us and nerd out about Aliens Dark Descent. But before we dig into the nitty-gritty of Lethe, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself? Who is Thibaut Claudel, and what do you do?
I ask myself the same question every day, I guess.
A bit of existential dread just to start it off.
Yeah. And before we start, I gotta say that my answer do not represent the views or opinions of Tindalos, Focus Entertainment, or 20th Century Fox. And I guess now the snipers from the Weyland-Yutani are leaving, so I can speak freely. So yeah, what does Thibaut Claudel do? Who he is? I ask myself this question. First and foremost, I think I am a kid from the French countryside, so I apologize for the bad English and the accent. And that kid developed like a massive interest, in everything pop culture, whether that be video games, comics, and of course movies. So I became a journalist, specialized in those topics after that. Until I joined the video game industry, first as a content editor, and then I started to dip my toes into the world of narrative design, because I always had this passion for writing and creating stuff. And so that's how basically I became a writer / narrative designer, depending on the projects. And that's how I got to work on Aliens Dark Descent.
Cool. What about other favorites outside of Aliens?
As you can see behind me, maybe I'm a massive Star Wars fan. Were you asking franchises or like stuff, or just the Alien movies? I'm sorry.
No, just in general. What's your jam?
Oh yeah, Star Wars was massive on me and still is. I'm a huge Warhammer 40,000 nerd, so you may know a bit about that as well, Aaron, as being the resident Brit from the podcast. Not really.
I never let myself get into Warhammer because
wise man.
I want a little bit of money left in my life. So I got into AVP's answer to it. I brought into Prodos's miniatures. But I never got to go do like any organized play or competitive play events, unfortunately. But I'm glad we got them. Because Warhammer's so obviously inspired by Alien and Predator in a lot of ways anyway, to actually have our own version was great. But sorry, I digress.
And not my fault. So yeah, I'm a huge comic reader as well. Like Batman, when I was younger, was like really my hero, and so I read a lot of comics back in the day, and a lot of things that we have here in France as well, like everything we say, like bande dessinée, and every heroes we have, from our local comic shops. And I was basically like always surrounded by that, because my father was also a huge fan of that sort of movies, and he was not into video games, because I guess they were not that much of a thing back then, but he introduced me to most of the stuff that I end up loving.
And Tindalos has done some Warhammer games as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. I don't want to get ahead of your questions, but they actually made 2 Battlefield Gothic games. So it's like a spaceship battles, like spin-off, I'd say, from 40,000. And it's actually why I wanted to meet them, at first. And we'll talk about that later.
Yeah,
I'll
we'll
save
get to
it
that.
for later. But they are a massissive fan of both the franchise, and it's actually funny because, as Aaron mentioned, like they are so much like 40,000, so much inspired by Alien specifically. So it all comes full circle.
And for me as well, welcome to our podcast. Thanks for joining. And since you've listened to a few of them, we have this tradition where when we have a new guest on the show, it's mandatory that we ask them about the first time they experienced the franchise we're talking about. So for you, do you remember the first time you came across the Alien?
Yeah, I remember it actually. And also, thank you very much for inviting me. I remember it because I wasn't that young. I actually grew up with a very loving but very strict parents in terms of what we could play and see at home. So I actually discovered like the Alien movies when I was in my first year of studying, like out of the family home. And I was aware, I guess, to an extent, of the creature, like the actual xenomorph, like, because I guess you cannot really escape his or its shape, and how much it is referenced throughout popular culture. So I know what it was, but I didn't, actually see it until I was like 19 or something like that. So I just remember like a friend from like school basically said, "Hey, let's watch let's watch a classic. Let's watch Alien." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that massive classic I know everything about." And basically discovered the first movie like that, and then asked, "Oh, you have like this steel book with the 4 movies. Can I just borrow it for a second?" And he said, "Oh yeah, well, you can watch them all you want." He knew them, I think, by heart way better than I used to, and so actually managed to steal that thing for a few days. And I was actually studying in a boarding school, so there was not really much to do except working, working on essays and whatever, and also watching movies at night when, officially it was curfew, but we were, using helmets and whatever, trying to watch movies with a lot of people around. So that's when I discovered Aliens, Alien 3, and Resurrection. And actually, I have a funny anecdote about that, because I was studying in the same place Jean-Pierre Jeunet studied. I mean, it was his high school at the time, which is kind of,
that's funny.
Yeah. How little the word can be sometimes.
So was he like a bit of a, obviously because he'd gone on to have a lot of success anyway, was he one of those ones that people talked about as being, the famous alumni at the school?
Like a legend, like I guess more like we had like courses on cinema history and everything. So I think the first one, it was one of the first thing that the teacher she mentioned that, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's the guy who did the movie I don't know a thing about. Not that movie. I knew he's other movies, but this one I discovered pretty late. I mean, but it was like everything I kind of mentioned happened like in a week or so. Like not even, I was watching. I think I watched 2 and then maybe 3 back to back, and I think I rewatched the second one right after that. I was like super impressed with that thing. And especially since, like Alien, sorry, has inspired so many things in video games. Like, like you have a lot of that in that movie, like the first person shooter type of characters and the movie lines that are very like badass soldiers, and even Apon, I guess, appears in Halo in another form of yeah. So I didn't know about that. I had experience. I had played Halo because it was PG 16 or something, and my parents were like, "You're 16, you can play this now," and so they were very much following the book. And I had escaped their site to watch horror movies or violent stuff, but I never managed to find, because I guess we were living in such a small city, and as I had a very little limited circle of friends. I never came across the actual movies until I was an adult, basically. But the beautiful thing about that story is that I knew, when I discovered them, I knew already like quite a lot about how to make movies, and I guess I appreciate them like first and foremost as as an adult, like someone who had like a massive interest on how to make movies, how difficult they are, how do you make those decisions and everything. And that's what Alien specifically always impressed me the most, because it felt like it was impossible to do something better than the first one when I first saw it. And like the day after that, I saw the second one. I was like, what is all that, And I guess people had to experience that. I mean, waited years to experience that, and I just waited 24 hours. And every movie, even Prometheus and Covenant, where a lot of people, and there is a lot of discussion about that still, but I think it had like something special for me to dig in, because I was already so much into movies, and it was not a fan reaction or I say that in a positive way, but like a childish reaction to, for instance, Star Wars behind me, or the stuff that I discovered when I was a kid. It really was different, and it stayed with me. And every time I watch, Aliens, I'm still blown away by how, I don't know, like intricate and detailed that movie is.
So you sort of took it more from a critical, knowledgeable point of view.
Yeah,
and it stuck with you because of that.
Yeah, because sometimes I guess I wasn't as much as a cinephile as I am nowadays, but I was still like kind of interested in that.
Journalist.
So yeah. I mean, yeah, in the making.
That's cool. I mean, that's not really an approach we hear from a lot of people, is it, Adam?
Yeah.
I mean, both of us, it was the mega influence as kids, and that's the story that you tend to hear a lot. So hearing you come at it from an adult point of view, but also it still leads you into this position as the writer of what people are really, really fucking loving. As an entry into the lore, it's interesting to hear you come at it from that other side. That's cool. And speaking of entries into lore, the Alien franchise has a huge backlog of games, and much like you were saying, or much like we know the films go in that they're different genres and different feels and stuff like that. The games are the same, as evidenced, of course, by Dark Descent. It's wholly unlike all but one, and that's only surface level of the other games. So some have been fantastic, some have been not so fantastic. Did you have much experience with the other Alien games prior to working on Dark Descent? Did you explore that corner of the fandom after watching the films?
Yeah, I guess it's a bit ironic. I played Alien games before I saw the movie. Sorry, I apologize for that.
I think that was us too, honestly.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. I didn't know.
Go on. Which ones then? What did you?
I think my first one was Aliens versus Predator 2, and that was the 2001 game, so the PC game. And I didn't play it at my home, but because my parents were like so, like always looking on my shoulder. But they actually, they had friends of their own, and one day they say, "Oh, we will spend the weekend at our friends," and I was like, "Oh, okay," and you're coming. I was like, "Oh, okay," and they actually had a son that was a few years older than me. And at some point, after like the dinner or something, he's like, do you want to stick out and play video games? And I'm like, yeah, cool, sure, whatever. And so he had like a massive PC that was probably like the family PC or whatever. And he said, oh, I have this thing. And that was Alien versus Predator 2. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And it's funny because I have like very vivid memories of playing as the Predator and trying to hunt everybody else, and that was fun. And I think I also played the revamp. I don't know, like another versus from Rebellion, I think in 2010. So that was like later. At a friend, and I remember being super interested in Colonial Marines when he was first announced, and until the reviews came out, and I thought like, because I was young and obviously like I didn't have that much money to invest into the game if I wasn't sure it was absolutely worth it, So I was like, yeah, okay. I was kind of, diverted from that game because of the reviews, but I still played it like a few years later. And of course, I played Isolation like everybody else. I don't know. Although I never beat it, I did a second run when I started working on Dark Descent. And I say that I didn't complete it because I didn't want it to be influenced. The reality is it scares the shit out of me. So I just like I wasn't able to finish that game. It's just like you beat certain steps and you remember like that was so hard in my previous experience, and now it's fine. And then you find that the game keeps on being scarier and scarier. So yeah, never managed to finish that game, to my shame, because it's an absolute like powerhouse of a game. It's just so good.
It's a very hard game, but it's also a game that I think works on such a visceral, physical level as well. I to this day still remember the adrenaline come down I was on after playing that game for the first time. That hit me on such a physical level.
Yeah,
brilliant game.
Definitely.
And what about your experience with the wider Aliens expanded universe? I mean, there's a lot of elements in the game that come from all over the EU. Had you read any of the older comics and novels, or was it the more recent reconciliation of all the old lore that was in the Free League RPG? Were you looking at that at all, or?
Yeah, that's a mix of all that. I would say that during my youth and like teenage years, I have read a few comics. I remember, but I don't remember what it was. To be honest with you, the only thing I remember was I think the crossover between Predator and Batman. So I wasn't aliens, but I was like, this is cool. I should find more stuff like that. But again, small towns and everything. So I never, really scratched that itch, which is a funny thing to say nowadays because it feels like it was the early 2000s, and nowadays it's just so easy to come across something and say, oh, I'll devour the entire canon of whatever universe. And that back in the day, it doesn't feel that long ago, but it was impossible to do. So it's funny how you came across, like I remember like for instance the Clone Wars comics from Dark Horse. That was difficult for me to find like the next entry in the series. And so I guess I had pick up a few things at the bookshop or maybe I don't know, flea market or something, but I wasn't aware of any actual series happening, in real time. Like every month you have to pick up your book. I wasn't aware of that. That said, Romain, our game director, he is a massive fan of the Dark Horse comic books of that era, 90s, especially, I think 2000 probably as well. So he's slightly older than me, and so he introduced me to it when I joined. And also novels like Sea of Sorrow. So I didn't read what he had what he had digested for the game. Also, that is true. Like I didn't want it to know every bit about it because I was afraid that we might, fall into the trap of doing the same thing. But I discussed that with him quite a lot, and he basically introduced me to the different bits, what was cool about it and everything. And the RPG, it's funny because going back to my point about not being able to, get your hands on everything you want on aliens and all that. When I think the RPG came out, it became, I guess, this ultimate work, on the alien canon. And I don't think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we had anything like that prior to the RPG. And I remember that it wasn't translated in French, and I could read English, but I was like, okay, let's see what they did, And I remember trying to find, like pictures from the book with the timelines and the lore about the Union of Progressive People, other companies, stuff from the larger alien canon and universe. And I'm not a canon mogul, but I remember that when I saw bits here and there on the internet, I thought, shit, this is cool. We have to do. I mean, someone has to do something with that. I never thought that I will be part of such an adventure. But I was really thinking there is so much more to do with that universe, and I think it was kind of fading. Because of I think Prometheus came out before, right?
Prometheus was out before the RPG.
Yeah, and then they had like franchise. They sometimes have that sort of brutal stuff. Like, oh no, we don't do those anymore because that movie or that book didn't do well. So at least that was my experience of it. But because not everything is translated here in France, and I didn't know everything about it, but the RPG sat on my desk throughout the entire production. So it's like definitely one of the Bibles. We had that one and the Aliens Technical Manual, I think it is.
The Colonial Marines Technical Manual.
Exactly that. A gem of a book, I think, because written in the perspective of, I guess, the 80s, and that's just so interesting how different it is from the RPG. And I think you mix those two, and you have basically what we really wanted to do with that game. So of course it played a massive, had a massive influence on us and on what the stories we wanted to tell. And also on not the story level, usually narrative design is used as, if you write the background stuff, the data pads and everything. So I'd say the narrative design was also about trying to use bits from that RPG and make them, relevant to our game. So definitely played a massive role in the production.
That's one of the things I liked the most about Dark Descent was just reading all of the notes people would leave around these environments, and it would make it feel very lived in. The game is kind of like a mesh of different genres, and I personally kind of describe it as like a survival horror, real-time strategy game. And that's something you see in survival horror a lot too, right? And like Resident Evil games, you'll see the notes left around, you'll read those and see what's been going on. So I thought that was all handled really well in this game.
Thank you.
But speaking of the RPG, one thing in particular that caught our attention was that ship, the Nostromo-inspired M-class Bison ship, the Marlowe.
Yeah.
The codex entry on that mentions it was allegedly destroyed, as we all thought it was in the RPG.
It's not
scenario.
the Marlowe.
The Montero, right?
Montero.
Yeah.
Marlowe's the character.
Marlowe's AVP 2010.
I got you.
Also
I
a
got
character
you.
in this game. But yeah, so is the Montero, is that meant to be the same ship from the RPG and it was just misreported that it was destroyed, or is this meant to be like more of a nod,
I think I have a confession to make regarding the Montero, because actually when we started, I think the mission was called Bison class ship or something. And then I asked about how the ship was called. and they said, "Oh, it's the Montero," and I was like, "Okay." And so note that down. Tried to use the name. We already had a script for the mission that wasn't, penned by me, but anyway. And then I realized, looking at the RPG, because as I said, it was on my desk, that it was the same ship. And I thought, guys, we have a problem, because like there is probably like some sort of mistake. Is that on purpose and everything? And no one could actually explain to me who named that ship. So either they were too shy to admit it, or so. And to the viewers at home, I don't want to feel unprofessional. That sort of stuff usually happen when you have like not hundreds, but I'd say dozens of people working on a game. Sometimes you try to sneak a Easter egg, trying to be clever or whatever, and or just to be a fan, as we all are. But then I was like, now I'm worried, because how can we make that work? And so basically that's when the allegedly destroyed part came in. But the funny thing is that it tied in, I think, quite well with our stories, saying that it was a ship that was repurposed for the cult's needs, And so I was like, maybe that could work. I tried to do a few things like that in the game. This is not the only weird connection or name in the that reference other alien material. And when I actually located that and discussed it with Fox, we tried to have a little nugget, a data pad, something, so that the fans will try to make connections. I have seen some crazy theories about that on the internet, and I love it, because I'm like, this is pretty cool. I think that should be our next story, And sometimes they have great ideas, but for the Montero specifically, it's just one of those funny anecdotes I will, I guess, tell for a lifetime. It was named like that, and I realized it month after that it was actually the same name from the RPG.
Gotcha.
You can get away with that one though as well, because if you've ever heard Gasker talk about his mentality when it came to writing the RPG, he talked a lot about barroom canon, and it was this idea of these stories are being told over drinks in a bar.
I love that.
And it's not necessarily correct, and there could be embellishments and blah 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 blah. So perhaps the Montero did survive.
Yeah. I also love that about Warhammer 40,000, and that's why I became such a fan. It's like they have this weird kind of loose, pun not intended, but loose canon. Like they have this sort of stuff. I think they have this sentence like evidence of absence is not absence of evidence, and that sort of stuff. So you can always imagine there is like a second side of the story, and it's kind of, from my point of view and the job that I do, that sort of stuff is so much richer and interesting for a game specifically, because you have to engage with so many little parts. And if we say this is the only truth about that game, we kind of sometimes break the immersion and the magic of discovering that world level after level. And I was very much like a fan of from the get-go when Tindalos introduced me to the project of the world building they had created, although sometimes the names were perhaps wrong. But I thought like we have to be super careful about that, about crafting a story that like a bigger story, like I like the small details and the what was it? It's like saloon talk. Oh no,
barroom canon.
Barroom canon. Thank you. And yeah, that sort of stuff, I think I am very much a fan of. And so I didn't know that was what I was writing, but that was definitely what I was writing. I mean, the idea was to insert a lot of stuff here and there so people can actually dig in the story and realize like this is an actual colony with a story, and sometimes the story will contradict other works, but I can either confirm or deny everything that happened. So yeah, that's always fun. That's part of the joy of working on such a massive IP, I guess.
Yeah, Yeah, cool. So now you've got to tell us about Tindalos, and now you've got to tell us about working on Dark Descent. How did you come to be involved in the game? How did that come about?
Yep. So basically, I mean, I needed a job, as simple as that. At the time, I was working with Enroad, which is a smaller studio, on another adaptation. Sorry, we're adapting a manga, like an anime called Grandizer, and that is massively like popular here in France. And so basically, we had done like a pre-production and started what we call a vertical slice. So it's like like a demo, like we will send to the editor and everything. And at this point, the publisher, sorry, wrong word, that's a French word. Anyway, and so I was like, very pleased with that, but we didn't know if it will move forward. So because I was freelancing at the time, they said to me that maybe you should look for something else in the meantime. Nothing will be wrong about that. You can go ahead. So I started to send a few resumes, and one of them was at Tindalos. I guess probably one of the first studios I wrote about. I wrote two, sorry. And so it was because I'm a massive Warhammer nerd, and I had loved their Battlefield Gothic games, and I assumed they were working on a third one or something like that, And they answered like a few weeks or month later, saying that they had no position available, but they had loved the profile, and I think that was fine because in the meantime I had signed a contract with the other studio. So I was like, okay, cool. Maybe, one day. And they actually came back to me a month after that. So that must be like October 2021, they answer. And in November 2021, they come back to me saying, now we have a position. And I'm like, oh shit, because I signed a contract with the other company, and I love them both. So how can I choose, between my darlings, so to speak? Unfortunately, because I was working part time with Enroad, I was able to arrange my schedule thanks to them, and work on both projects when I started. So I started. I think I signed on the day of my 30th birthday, which was quite a gift. And I know it. I knew at this time that it was aliens because I signed the NDA and blah blah blah, and basically started like 1st of December, and until I guess I I did my last work on the project maybe earlier this year, 2023. So that was quite the adventure, working on both projects at the same time, and especially since Dark Descent was way ahead of us on the second project, and so they had like a lot of things that were actually quite urgent, and so those days were intense, but very fun, and it was a pleasure to work with them. I hope we'll continue to do that. And I was so like, it was such a warm welcome when I arrived. It's sometimes difficult to arrive into a production that is already so much advanced. Like they already have so many things, and still there is a lot to do, and you kind of come up and you say, well, we need to change that, and so maybe it puts you in a difficult, tricky position. But I think they were always nice to me and super, like I'd say, open to discussion, trying new things, and trying to improve the project for the good of telling a great alien story. As well as making a great alien game, because I think Romain, the game director, especially, and since he's the game director, he's at the top of the project, so he kind of infused us with that passion, for that story and for that word, and he really wanted that game to have like a proper narrative side. And so I was super fortunate to be invited, and frankly quite honored to be invited to work on such a project with the experience that I had then.
So you applied for Tindalos because you wanted a job, just full stop. But at what point did you know it was aliens then? Did you accept the job working with Tindalos before you even knew it was aliens you'd be working on?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we had a first talk. So when I sent the resume, out of the blue, I knew nothing about the project. I assumed they were working on a third Battlefield Gothic game or Warhammer stuff because they were so passionate, in the interviews and everything. I thought these guys will never let go of that franchise. So I have a shot at working at Warhammer stuff. And I speak too much about Warhammer anyway. And so when they contacted me back, not saying we love your resume, but we have a position. So a few months after that, they were saying, vague stuff. And so basically vague stuff is difficult because you're like, okay, I'm interested, but I would like to, would you like to know more? And it's sort of stuff moment, And so I was actually anxious to hear about it. It's the first thing that came through my mind when they started describing the project was actually Marines, like Marines from Aliens. And then they announced it was Aliens, and I was like, yeah, obviously. but I wasn't 100% sure, of course, and so I knew nothing on the project. They described it as like kind of XCOM, but in real time with RPG elements and like a proper story, and I was kind of intrigued by what I heard, and I thought, wow, if it is exactly like they say it is, it must be something quite ambitious, and it was. So I'm glad I got to work on such an ambitious project.
So you served as the writer and narrative designer for Dark Descent, yeah?
Yeah, one of them.
One of them, okay. So
Yeah.
can you explain to our audience then what's the difference there? What's the delineation? What did you do on one and what did you do on the other?
It's a very thin line, I'd say, and I guess it's I mean, you could explain it because the positions, both of those positions are not super well described. It's relatively new in the video games industry, so they usually, sometimes it's obviously, a bit blurred, and so one can do the other. Big companies usually will have writers and narrative designers, doing very separate things, and the image that I give is usually that you will have like the canvas that would be the narrative designer, and actually the painting the stuff is the writer. So I don't know, like studios, like for instance, like Telltale Games, narrative designer, they will outline the different bits in an episode, saying we should include this, that sort of moral choices. We should have an action scene at whatever point, and then a writer will come with ideas to fill those different bricks, like it's like a sort of narrative Lego set, to build together. Usually on smaller studios or projects, you do both. So it's very rare nowadays, I guess, to have full writers on small projects, except when they come from other medias like movies or comic books, or maybe they just write. They don't think about how does that interact with gameplay, because the very simple definition would be a writer will write the lines, not really thinking about that. And the narrative designer has to say, the lines need to be shorter. We have to be careful because we have a cutscene, and then we have that much intensity in the gameplay. So we shouldn't, send important information to the player when he's actually fighting, so many xenomorphs. That does happen in the game because of the AI, and because it's quite a tricky game. But yeah, so basically, I don't know if that makes sense, if that helps you understand a bit better what those two jobs are about. But long story short is usually when you are working on a smaller project or with a smaller studio, you will probably have to do both, which is fine by me because I played so many video games, so I like to try to understand how does the gameplay interact with story. But also, I guess I'm a very creative person. I want to write the lines. I want to find the best jokes, the best whatever. And so I really like to actually paint that famous painting I was mentioning. So I was one of the lucky few working on that project. So I guess they had another narrative designer, and of course they had another writer. That was Matthew Ward, who already worked with Tindalos on Battlefield Gothic, and who was a real gentleman when I arrived. He was leaving because he had books of his own to finish, and basically couldn't, work on the two at the same time. And so I remember, like the first time we talked, he said, you can destroy everything, you can change everything, I won't mind. But he said, you have to break the curse. That game needs to have a writer from start to finish that he never had. I think we also had, I never met him, but Gauthier, who worked on the project. And of course, Romain, the game director, like wrote so many things about the game as well, and had so many ideas. So it was like definitely like multiple brains involved. And Matthew like just handed me the baton and said, like run with it. Finish that quest for me. And I did. And it's always a weird thing, because I guess you could compare that to script doctoring, if like I guess you guys know
coming on for the polish.
Yeah. And you're a bit like we'll change this and change that. And that wasn't my experience of it. I really wanted to deliver something polished, and like trying that's for sure. But also I did try to invest and myself into the project and add stuff that was 100% my jam, or my ideas, my obsessions, I would say. And the mix, I guess, tend to have found its fans. Like I heard good things on the story, so I was quite pleased with that. But yeah, I can also elaborate on everything that was mapped out, or if that interests you.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the next question, actually. When you came on and you took over those reins, how mapped out was the game? How different was it to what it ultimately became under your guiding hand?
It wasn't that much different, I'd say. To my understanding, the first concept of the game, they date back to 2019, I think. So it's actually like an old project. So it wasn't developed back then, but it was, they had a clear prototype of what they wanted to do when I arrived. So that's 2 years later. The game was pretty well into production. Most levels were there. The story structure and the beats were there. And Matthew, had delivered like a structure that was actually, sound and solid. So I was actually able to see the story from start to finish, not play it maybe, but usually I remember most levels were playable somewhat. It's a funny thing, because we had the story bits, and for instance, like the mission 10, which I think is called Price of Deception, was block. We had block of colors on Unreal. It wasn't totally finished, but you could have the different bits and you could actually play it. So most of it was there, to put it simply. But we had a lot of feedback to take into account. So those feedbacks, for instance, Mako, the main character, unclear plans from the protagonist, a lot of people in the studio and with the publishers, and the reviews we have, internally from external partners, whatever. They were quite confused about that. And there were scenes, that had been skipped ahead, so they were not sure about what to do. So they just said, okay, let's go with the next level. We'll figure it out later, which is not unheard of. Definitely not unheard of in video games, because it's by nature so much more iterative, and we always question everything. We always have to go back to not ground zero, but sometimes that happens, like that gameplay feature that is so massive for your game might change at the last moment, and you have to change so many things. You have like so many different mechanics and bits to take into account. And that's why it's usually, I hear a lot about stories in video games not being good and everything is also because of that production and how it works. It's very different from movies. That said, they had, the characters, they had what they wanted to do, the antagonist. So basically, I didn't game with new characters, for instance. I just used what I had. I changed a few of them in terms of maybe personality or that sort of stuff. But basically, my first month, they were talking with Romain, discussing one bit at a time. And I remember, I was arriving pretty early in the morning. He working on what we had discussed yesterday, and then he joined me for lunch at the local restaurant we used to go like every day. And the same. We were discussing another thing or something that inspired both of us when we were young, and trying to to channel that. I was listening to your interview with the director of Prey, and he was saying like he used different scenes from other movie to talk to actors about channel that sort of stuff. And that is super interesting to me because I thought I was cheating trying to do that myself with the writing, like, oh, we should have that sort of moment, or trying to watch stuff on YouTube in the middle of restaurant, referring to the project as the creature, or we had a word like that, so we couldn't speak about we're making an alien game at the restaurant. So obviously we had to little precautions to take, but that was fun. I mean, that was probably like the best part of the job, because there is so many things you can do at this point. The first month we're like, wow, yeah, my brain was basically like overloaded with ideas, and then you have to come up with a plan. And as soon as we had the plan on how to rework the story and put the different bits, I think we changed the order of 2 levels as well. I don't remember which one. That might be 6 and 7 or something like that. But I mean, except for that, basically the plan was set, and then we moved to rewriting the interludes. So those were the cutscene, between missions, the actual cutscenes in missions, and then the mission themselves with the dialogue and the story beats, and also the information for the player that were missing, because that was another feedback, that people were lost in the game because of how massive the maps were and how little you had, like basically you don't have much help from the game. It's actually a very hard game, and it's designed like that. It wasn't a flow, but we had to find ways to improve, make that design a bit more accessible, or I guess more friendly to new players or people who wanted to enjoy the story, because it's such a difficult thing to say, like, oh, we have this massive story. You only have to beat 20 alien queens that are almost impossible to beat, So I'm glad we have a story mode. Basically, I played the game in story mode, so I cannot beat that thing in a harder difficulties. It's just too much for my little brain. I'm not a, I'd say competitive. I don't know if that's the word, but Romain actually can't do it. He did it. He's really good at his own game. I'm not, but yeah, that was pretty much how things were back then, but it took a lot of months to to work on every mission, and we did it in chronological order. And I think when I started working on the interludes, Matt was finishing his draft basically of the last mission. So the only month we had in common, he was working on the last mission, and I was starting to make the plan for how to make a second draft. I speak in Hollywood terms, in movie terms, but maybe you'll understand me better if I say it like that, because otherwise it's not sexy.
It sounds like such an chaotic way to work as a writer, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I guess every writing job is a bit chaotic. I mean, in my experience, limited experience. but it's very much the truth about video games, because of the iteration process and the way production works and the non-linear, type of storytelling. Is just like you need a lot of people, you need everybody on the same page, you have a lot of setbacks, you can have stuff added last minute or taken out of the game at the last minute. I don't think I meet with other narrative designers or writers, and I never heard any one of them saying, "Oh, that was perfect from start to finish." First draft was great. It was shot like that. It was actually, like the gameplay didn't affect it in any way. So it's always like super tricky, but it's part of the fun, and you have to be, I guess, if I can say, like if I can defend my team of writers working in video games, is you have to be extra creative and able to receive a lot of feedback from very different people, and sometimes people that are definitely not understanding the game you're making, and you're like, yeah, okay, point taken. Well, I have to, try to, I guess, classify every information and I guess learn what is the best feedback we can take from everything we just heard, because sometimes it's just an overload of people asking stuff like, oh, we should put it's actually something I think I heard on the project is like, we should put an helicopter, and I was like, what? An helicopter? Well, we have the dropship. That surely that is fine, And they were saying, oh yeah, the dropship. Oh yeah, it's true. We have that. Sometimes you have stuff like that, and you're like, are you maybe you're confusing me with another studio or another people. But everybody, I mean, from publisher's side as well, they have a lot of stuff on their plate, so you have to be able to speak the same language, if that makes sense.
And speaking about a very prominent narrative element, one of the things we personally found satisfying about Dark Descent was the inclusion of the cult. While this is something we've seen in the past, it's not something we've typically seen very frequently. So can you tell us a bit about the decision to include them as the primary antagonist in the game?
Yeah, sure. So to my understanding was that the cult was always there. And in fact, I have a few anecdotes for you. I hope you'll dig that. I think I heard at least that their presence and the fact that we were a real-time strategy game saved the project from the merger. Because usually what happens is that when another company takes over, they kill a project from the old company.
Yeah, but there was quite a few victims of it on the Alien side. And Predator.
Yeah, I imagine so, and I feel for them, because working years and years on big projects like that are, I mean, I have described my Dark Descent as a small project is because we are still like a very small studio, and it's a very small game at the scale that we have now in video games. But even that scale is just so damn painful to hear about those games being canceled, basically. But sometimes they resurface, one way or the other. So I'm sure we'll learn great things about them, I hope soon. But basically, I think the game wasn't actually signed during the merger, but usually like they shouldn't have come back to it. They should have said, okay, that was the thing from Fox. We don't want that. And I think actually the work they started to do with 20th, they were so impressed with that cult thing and quite excited by the perspective of having a RTS that they say, okay, we'll do it. We'll continue working on it. And I think it served two purposes, that cult. I think one, Romain, when he was in his teenage years, he was blown away by the Dark Horse comic books. I was mentioning it. And so I think a panel in particular, he actually showed me that panel in his omnibus.
Is it the one with Salvage with the alien?
The cover?
Alien.
Oh no, I don't remember. I should check out. But the one thing I remember was like the little detail, I think, in drawn in the panel whereas I think a guy with his own blood wrote Darwin was right on the wall, if that rings a bell.
Yeah, it does.
And so he was actually, we have this saying in French. I mean, that's very much like kids talking, but we say matrixé, or like using the matrix as something that actually, blow your mind. And he was actually matrixed, if that makes sense in English, by this panel, because he keep referencing it as, the moment that really stuck with him and gave him this idea of a cult that was obsessed with evolution theories or theory, or like it, and he kept that idea of his in his mind for years. I can relate to that as a writer, and so recently, actually, I think showed us the printed version of the game. Like he made like an RPG version of the game, RPG/war game version of the game when he was a teenager. Sorry, and it's a very early prototype of Dark Descent, but I think there is certain bits in the story that are still there, which is quite funny. And I don't remember how he called the planet back then. I think it was a colony with like 666 at the end. It's not subtle. It's like a teenage work for sure. But I loved it. I love every panel, like every shot he took from the book. It was that was beautiful. That guy, I'm so impressed with that work, and I love him. Like he's a maniac with that project. He actually kept him in the corner of his mind for so long. So I'm so glad to have helped him put it forward with the rest of the word. But going back to the cult, sorry, the cult was already there back then, and it made sense, I think, with the genre, the RTS side of things, having enemies that could take cover, shoot, talk with you, maybe. So it just clicked, I guess, with the genre, and also I think he really wanted to put forward that cult element because it was so, I guess, present throughout the canon. I'm not as knowledgeable as you guys are on that side, but from what I understand, is it was also in another form, but in a first script from Alien 3 or another one maybe. So it was always there, that idea of people being fascinated by the creature, and Romain was also fascinated by the idea of people being fascinated. So he really wanted to give them a face, if that makes sense. They don't really have a face. I mean, some of them don't because of the mask.
And, I mean, they have a very prominent chest.
Yeah, right. And I think also the design really helped sell that project, because I saw the first concept art for the guys when I started. They already had, I think they were working on the final design, which is so damn cool. And the first design were intense, like they were even weirder. But you couldn't see that and say, not interesting, derivative, we already saw that. It was so striking, I think, that we had to do it. And so, yeah, I guess because of the dream of a teenage boy that is not me, and the fact that he worked well with the genre, we had to use them. And I was glad we used them, because I just love that idea so much as well. When I read about, that idea throughout the Alien canon, I thought, why on earth, why on earth nobody made a movie about that yet? So I was super excited to work on them, and I hope that answers your question, Adam. But we can dive deeper if you want.
Well, I was curious too so the name of the cult, Darwin Era, was that inspired by that panel you had seen?
You found it back, Aaron? Yeah. So maybe that wasn't blood. That was actually, that was me saying weird stuff.
So that is from the early pages of book 2, Nightmare Asylum, when they're watching the broadcasts from a very fucked up alien infested Earth.
Okay. So from. Yeah, and I think
could be blood, but it's on a chalkboard. But
yeah, so probably not. But yeah, I guess I have Sinister's ideas, and I retell my own stories. The canon is broken, but Thank you for showing the panel. And I, it's funny because he showed that to me like pretty early on in the project, and I realize now, 1.5 years later, a bit more, but I speak like an old person, and I have embellished the story. I guess that must be like a professional mistake or something. I'm always trying to force of habit, but yeah, the name came from that panel, and the name actually had that weird new age type of cult sensibilities, that sort of era of new faith, if that makes sense, that we had in the 90s. He was very much like not into that, but into the story of that. And I guess that's not that much different from what Sir Ridley Scott did, because he was also inspired by the theory of ancient astronauts and everything. So it was all that, coming from the what is the actual idiom, cut from the same cloth, is that it? So yeah, so we were actually trying to, I guess, mirror a bit of that as well. And yeah, it served the name is actually quite weird now that I think about it, but it just sells their objective, their purpose, quite frankly. It's just like, we're about evolution. So okay, nice to meet you, Darwin Era. And so basically they saved the game apparently, so thank you for that, guys.
I agree with you in terms of how they not explored this more. It was a very interesting part of the first series. I loved the idea of the Church of the Immaculate Incubation, I think is what the original one's called. So when it was showing up as a primary part of this, I was like, oh, this is fucking interesting. Somebody's finally playing with it. So yeah, I thought that was cool.
I think we could have done more with them, to be frank. I hope I will be able to revisit some of it. Maybe not with a game, but maybe a tie-in or something, because I really think there is even more to tell about these guys, and because of the creature and the importance of her, I keep referring as her or his, but I don't, anyway. But yeah, the shape is actually so powerful, and the different xenomorph variants that we have nowadays. It's just, people expect that, especially in the game, as your bosses or mini bosses and everything. And so I guess we wanted to also offer something new, something fresh and different. But I guess you can never beat the original, So at the moment you see the actual xenomorphs, maybe people start to feel like these guys with the weird chest are cool, but not necessarily interesting. On my side, I really think I would have loved, like, if I could do like a movie version of the story. I'd probably like put alien in, the xenomorphs, like in the back, like you almost never see them. You see the chest burster maybe in their actual machines, but you have guys that are obsessed maybe with one or two, maybe they have a queen or something like that, but you can't reveal it until the very end. That would be so cool to have. That sort of stuff like Prey has done for Predator, I guess. Like, it's in the franchise, but no, we will keep it slightly a secret. I think I dig that a lot. I myself respond to that massively. So maybe there's more to explore with those guys.
Definitely. I think in general there's a lot of implications from the lore that there's plenty to explore with this one. But we've got questions about those later. So you mentioned Mako Hayes earlier. With what did you say? The direction of her was unclear early on.
Yeah.
Now, she is really interesting and really fun in that she's entirely different from the sort of general portrayal you'll get of a Weyland-Yutani employee. Her well-meaningness is something that is very well contrasted with Price, especially in that 10th mission.
Yes, that's
the
10th.
the
Yeah.
10th mission, and that is an awesome fucking exchange between the two, in that final cutscene. So, thank you for that exchange. I mean, I had literal sort of, her journey in the, in the game, and the cutscene as you lead into the final mission as well. That pan up of her, and, I had literal goosebumps at that point. I'm not gonna lie.
Thank you so much.
Tell us about that journey then. Going from this, not sure what direction we should take the protagonist in, to this very different version of a Weyland-Yutani employee.
Yeah, okay, cool. First, I'm so glad to hear that, because I guess it was the hardest part of my job on that project was Mako. I'll elaborate on that. I don't know if, Adam, you have anything to add, if you loved her or not. I mean, feel free to.
No, I thought she was a really interesting character, and I'm right with Aaron in that very atypical for someone in the executive position of Weyland-Yutani, I guess. I mean, I feel like the Alien universe does try and have a bit of nuance with those things, but it still can kind of revert to, the I just want to be in it for the corporation and the money and all that. And I guess we did see a bit of that with Price and the contrast with her and Mako. But I thought Mako was a great protagonist, and how she had this arc from being entrenched with the company and into, by the end of the game, fully embracing this new identity as a Marine. And I thought that was really well handled.
Thank you so much for saying so. I mean, you cannot really see it because my camera is probably bad, but I'm actually blushing. I'm so glad to hear that, because we had like so many feedbacks to take into account on this thing. And for writers listening, when you hear about, for instance, that a character is unlikable, it's crushing, because you're like, what does that mean? Like, because some characters are supposed to be unlikable first and foremost, and also sometimes it's just not an actionable feedback, like, what does it mean to be likable? I don't understand. And so we had that feedback. Actually one of the first thing I heard about that character was that. And so she was for sure a very difficult character to write. Unlikable for some, for others it was the fact that you're playing her, but not always, different depending on the levels, which is also a challenge. And when I talk about her with Matthew, when I actually came to the job, and I asked him to describe the different characters, because I had obviously to write them after him, and because they were, to my understanding, his creations. He described her as an introvert, and say he had zero problem writing her like that, because he was an introvert as well. Problem is, I'm not. So to me, the fact that he wrote her like that made it extra difficult, because I think at first I tried to push, I guess, my vision, and I really wanted to feel different. I think my original pitch to Romain, our game director, to revamp the character, if that makes sense, was to say, like, Ripley, she is that character, and she has like a blue color. We need the same kind of character with a white color, and she has to do stuff that people understand and respect, although it doesn't feel like the right choice, And discussing with that, he reminded me that, for instance, in the first movie, I think Replay, she doesn't want the infected guy to, be in the ship, and so we kept referring, we kept referencing that bit to everybody, saying like, what? But why does she push that button, at the beginning of the game? And we're like, well, we want to see the game where that happens and that turn wrong, and that's kickstart the story, if that makes sense. And so we had a lot of things like that to iron out, I guess. But to me, the fact that she had flaws, or that she had moral ambiguities was a good thing. It was never about that, but it was difficult to hold the line, if that makes sense, because you hear, as I mentioned, so many feedback, people trying to push into a direction that is more familiar or more comfortable, and but they don't understand that if you change that beginning, the whole journey has to change. And so I think she was interested as it is. I was interested just like you guys did, and that's why I'm so glad to hear that she is a bit like different and kind of, I won't say weird, but she doesn't really fit like a mold that we already see. We have that in the game. I'm not saying we made the most original thing. We have Price, we have Marlowe, we have probably archetypes that people who are familiar with that IP, they will know by heart almost. But I think what she was really missing was some kind of quirk quirkiness, if that makes sense, and also a proper journey. For instance, the scene that you mentioned, Aaron, when I arrived, my understanding was that it was supposed to be much quicker, and Mako was supposed to end the scene shooting her, like killing Price in. Sorry, spoiler alert. I mean, it didn't happen, so you're safe for now.
It's fine. There's gonna be a spoiler alert on the intro.
Okay, cool. Thanks. And so basically, she was supposed to shoot her in cold blood, and it didn't really make sense, at least for me. I mean, it just wasn't the journey we had embarked, with. It was just like, she's not on that train, it's a totally different train. We're changing direction. And I remember having so many discussion about that. And so some of the first, I keep saying the first things, but I guess there were plenty of first things. What I really wanted to do first and foremost was to move Price to appear earlier in the game, because I think when I joined, she was appearing, and she was not even mentioned, until I think mission 8 or something like that, And so I was a bit sad about that. And also, if you study a bit of how Hollywood does it, how movies, you don't introduce like an antagonist 20 minutes before the movie ends. Like it's a weird thing to do. I mean, it can work and can surprise people, but basically nobody cared about Price, and so nobody cared about that meeting and that exchange between the two. So I tried to make her more prominent, if that makes sense. And since we had that, it felt like she could have exchange. We could show Mako being kind of referring to her as a potential solution, because not everybody is bad in the company and blah blah blah. And so killing her in cold blood, that would have been, I guess, a mistake, because she's a Marine. She at the end, as you mentioned, Adam, I think that was you, but yeah, it doesn't mean that you shoot everybody that does not agree with you. And it felt wrong for me that someone who was willing to actually take the blame, or actually made her hands dirty to protect a whole planet. And now she was like, okay, my journey was that to be traumatized by the lives I've taken to protect others, like I guess the greater good, or whatever you call it. And now she was just killing people, it's another Friday in Mako's life, and she has a gun, so why not? So fortunately, Romain agreed, I think. And he had something totally different in mind. So I guess he must had he had done his math, and he knew it didn't really make sense. And so he described to me his idea as, we should have like more like a verbal, like a word joust, and it's about who will have the moral high ground. And if you can add a little bit of Blade Runner, on top of that, that would be great, Thibaut. Just do that, but no pressure. And I was like, okay, it's the most difficult thing I ever been tasked with.
I think you nailed that, because I think
Thank you so much.
price has very much now become the decade, which we've got to ask you about as well. Your thoughts on that answer.
And so I wrote that thing. I think I worked so hard on that scene. I think when I started writing that scene one day, taking the metro, the subway in Paris, and suddenly, like, I had the first sentence, and I usually, if you want to know everything, but I guess I usually start with dialogue, whatever I write, and so I usually don't have the image in first, but just like what people would say, and then I had the introduction, and then it kind of started to sing, as you guys say, and so I just wrote that down on my phone, hoping that by the time I arrive at Tindalos, it will not feel shitty, because sometimes you write some stuff, you put the phone back in your pocket, you reread it 5 minutes later, and this is trash. That won't work. And it felt kind of good to write it and try to polish it a bit. And Roma loved it, actually, but we went through several iterations of that scene, and I fought hard to keep it as long as we made it, because the poor cinematic team, like, they had to animate like a dialogue that is probably like 2 minutes and 40 seconds. I remember something like that, but maybe it's a bit shorter in the end. But it's something that for our viewers, listeners, usually video games, they never do, because cutscenes are so hard and damn expensive. Like, you will do the action stuff, you won't do the talking stuff, and it's changing, because of big companies, like, for instance, the Spider-Man games from Insomniac did. Like, you have a lot of cutscenes that are not action, but more like dialogue or like slice of life stuff, and I love that. So it's changing, but what you have to realize is that they have more than 10 times our budget. So when basically I said, it's a dialogue, it's a verbal just, it's about the high ground, just like Romain said. So he can be the game director, but he's not always right, So everybody was like, yeah, with Thibaut, it's going to be super difficult. It's going to be super boring in terms of, what shot we can use and everything. But actually, Arnaud, the lead from the cinematic team, like, he has, like, I think, a background in photography, like actual, movie photography. So he had a lot of ideas, I think as soon as it made sense to him, that moral contest, he had ideas about details and everything. And regarding the Blade Runner aspect, that also, I think, clicked with him, about stuff that could be put into that scene, indicating that she is indeed a synth or she is not, depending on, if you catch those details. I think we end up with something. I have seen the released version, and first of all, like, the two actresses, they nailed it. I think it's probably better for them. I don't want to assume, but I guess it's not video game dialogue. It's just actual. They were not recording
it's just
together,
story.
but it's just story, right? And so I think they nailed it. It's just it feels good to see that scene, and it feels good that you guys loved it, and also a lot of people reacted to it. And I saw, like, a Reddit thread, like, saying, "Did Mako Price, is she a bad person?" And I think that made my day. Like, we were, like, talking about that for hours with Romain. Like, what will people think about that character? Did we nail it? With the confrontation with Price regarding all that, what will people take away from that? And I think people are actually not, one side or the other. They were actually exchanging ideas about morality and that sort of stuff. I'm not saying I wrote a philosophical essay on right and wrong, but it just feels good when it clicks with people, when they actually like run with it, and they have their little theories about that. And regarding the Blade Runner thing, I guess that helps as well. Trying to I guess excite the imagination, sorry, of people playing. But is she or not a synth? I don't know. I think the first version I wrote was clear that she is, and I think we had little details that Arno had storyboarded, like she was supposed to, hammer her desk that is actual, like a stone or like a massive, brutalist thing. And we were supposed to have like a large shot, or maybe not like an insert or something very close, but where you could see that, like the actual, I don't know what's the word in English for that, but basically like the shape of her fist on the thing on the desk.
Yeah.
So it was supposed to indicate like she had strength.
Mm.
We had another iteration, I think, with the gun, that she had the gun but she couldn't shoot. And I guess that came back from Asimov and rules about robotics, not robots not being able to shoot humans. But I was like, in Aliens lore, I don't think that makes sense, because they attack people and they can kill them if they want. So I wasn't sure it worked in that regard, but it was a nice reference to one of the sci-fi masters and whatever. So we had a few details here and there. I think they were all cut to leave the imagination and your theories open. So I don't know. I don't think it will be discussed in 40 years. Who knows? Like Blade Runner is still discussed, and then one day you have Harrison Ford or Ridley saying it's that it's that version is canon. The rest you can forget about. I love those moments where maybe she's not. Maybe it's it depends on your, I guess, what you want to see in that scene, and does she have to be a synth and to be such a machine? That line might be a bit like on the nose, but it's just, I felt like we did a good job with this one, but it was very much like a team effort. Started with me because the brief was like so. I mean, that was a nightmare, to be honest with you. I thought like I would never come out of this alive. People will hate me for that scene. But actually, people, now that I've seen the like reviews and deep dive here and there, people love that scene, which is the craziest thing to me. It's surreal that you guys actually loved Mako for one and loved that scene in particular. But I guess it's because maybe we corrected the track she was on, and hopefully it makes all sense now, whether you think Price is indeed a synth or not.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
what do you guys think?
That was a really interesting mission. It definitely had some Blade Runner influence. I mean, in kind of that city part of the planet itself, but
the city was beautiful.
Even Price's office, like that really reminded me of Neander Wallace's office in 2049
Yeah,
with water on both sides and everything. But yeah, Mako's character had some interesting complexity, and like you were saying, she was an introvert, and I didn't notice that until you mentioned it, and then looking back, I was like, yeah, she is kind of an introvert, but that's also kind of she has other traits, like she's also quick to take a leadership position. She's, so that can maybe be less common in introverts. I don't know, but so she did have some interesting dynamics at play with herself. Like there were some scenes where she would kind of say something that was a bit out of line, and a Marine would tell her, and she'd be like, "Oh, you're right. Yeah, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that." So she was a bit introspective as well.
That was something I really liked about Mako, was that she took responsibility very quickly and very early on. The earlier parts of the game, when she first joins up with the Otago and the Marines, and she kept her role in the Cerberus protocol a secret.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, please do not keep this a secret too long. And you hit the perfect mark on when she revealed it, took that responsibility early on, and it informed a lot of her behavior, or seemed to, in my opinion, informed a lot of her behavior as the narrative progressed there, in terms of owning up to what she'd done and making up for what she'd done with this you know, a lot of attempting to fix what she'd done, but then also having Harper's mentality of we are Marines, we help people, start to push and inform that a little bit more. And Harper, I fucking loved Harper as well. You know, I thought, you know, I very quickly was endeared to him, you know, and he had a very interesting ability with the telepathy, and that's something you need to tell us about as well, because that's much like the cult, you know, that's something that was in, or some form of it was in very early on in the original series. You know, it was more alien initiated than anything else, and you had a little bit of it in, you know, you mentioned Sea of Sorrows earlier that the game director mentioned to you. You know, it's not telepathy as such in that book, but empathy, you know, like the betazoids in Star Trek. So, you know, tell us about that. How did that come into the game? Was that another one from the game director, sorry?
I would assume so. I think so. I don't think they always had Mako as the main character. I don't think they had like Harper as well. So it must have been, you know, those two characters are like iteration from earlier concepts, I would assume, although I don't know the full, you know, extent of their background as, you know, prototype characters and whatever. But as soon as I heard that, oh, he's an empath and he can interact sort of with the xenomorph or the hive, I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. I didn't know we could do that, you know, in Alien canon, and so we started to talk about Sea of Sorrow and what they how they describe their disability there. And I think I say ability because that was very clear from Fox that we couldn't say it's a power. You know, it's not a thing like you put your hand and you pet the xenomorph and you scratch his head. Definitely not. So it's more like you know, a very thin thing that can actually fade away maybe with time, or actually take a massive toll on your body and your mind. So that was quite interesting to write. And it was way more fun to write. I mean, usually it's I guess it's because I am so much into like military characters and that sort of stuff. It was, you know, it clicked with me faster. And but you know, much like Mako, there was like some emotional, I would say, I keep using that sentence, you know, like like when I talk to my other writers or people in the industry, of emotional, you know, honesty, if that makes sense, is that sometimes I feel like in games in particular, we want the story to have an impact on characters, but we don't show that impact because we don't have time, because cutscene they you know, they spend too much money, they're too hard to make, and so it was, I mean, Harper was missing a lot of also of cracks and flows. He was, I guess, mysterious, kept his abilities a secret longer in the first versions. And I thought, well, if Mako reveals what she has done earlier into the game, surely it will, I guess, inspire the Harper to do the same thing about his, you know, his abilities, his daughter, and all that jazz. And so I think the scene, the Blade Runner scene, let's call it that, is one of the, like, the thing I'm the most proud of. But second to that is on those little lines and moments I added in between the missions, where you could actually see Harper is actually, you know, he emotionally he's going down. You know, like he's actually under so much pressure, and we have to see that he fears for himself, for his daughter, for his Marines. But you know, something we don't usually see, I think, in in those type of characters, military characters and action, type of badasses. Like, I really wanted to see that same sort of sensibility if we can draw another parallel. Well, Aliens, I think when Hicks like kind of take Newt and Replay under his wing, there is there is a warmth to him, that really I really wanted to have. I guess that speaks to you, Aaron, in particular, knowing your nickname. But I really wanted to have that sort of stuff, because I was afraid the cold, one-liner type of sergeant was cool, because I like to write that and I like to see those characters. But if it's just the abilities, well, I guess they become what we didn't want it to become. Was just he has this superpower, he has this ability, he press on Q or E on his keyboard, and now he can control the hive. And so I really wanted to balance that with some emotion, which is hard to do when we had the cutscenes, we had motion capture, so we had a lot of tools at our disposal. But it's just more difficult to do than when you are shooting a movie, I guess, and you're with your actors throughout the whole thing. But I think Jared Zeus, who's voicing Harper, he has a lot of that in his voice, and he actually did a lot of games before that, but very little roles, like most voice actors do. I'm not dissing on that. On the contrary, I think I was super impressed with the warmth he had. I really wanted to lean into that thing, and it's another, I guess, lesson I learned from Matt. He was only there working with me for 1 month, but he said, before you write those characters, those we already chosen a voice for, you have to listen to. And I didn't know we had that. And so I listened to his voice, and I was like, oh, okay, so we can actually lean, on that emotional side of things. And the empathy is, I guess, very much like I don't know if we say the empathy, but the abilities is very much the same thing as the cult. It was a great idea that was present throughout a lot of works, I guess. Maybe not a lot, but it was already present. And also it could make for a great gameplay mechanic, because you could actually inform the player of what the hive was trying to do, or if it was trying to trick you and that sort of stuff. And I think we wouldn't be able to do that and help the player with just instruments or like machines and everything. So it added a level of I guess it's more visceral like that. It's more interesting as well. It's greedier, if that makes sense, because he's not an actual device. He's an actual man and a soldier as that, with the troubled past, which is another thing that was present in earlier versions, removed, and I added back in when I arrived. The fact that he actually served against his own people, trying to put down that uprising, and that sort of stuff was for me opportunities to create like a character with a deeper background, and like emotional background, and just your typical cool looking, cool sounding Marine. If I hope we made that quite okay. I'm not sure, but I'm kind of curious to hear about what you guys think in terms of balance, between Harper's abilities, Mako, her secrets. There was a lot of back and forth on that at the studio and with the publishers. So I'd be curious to hear what you have to say about that.
I really did like the dynamic between those two characters, and that's why I found it kind of a shame what ended up happening to Harper.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, why did he have to go that far? But I really liked his character. I liked him stepping up to the plate. It's kind of interesting in the beginning that he's a bit reluctant. He's like, wait, no, you have seniority, not me,
That
But
was one of the things I really liked about him. And that's one of the things that I find endearing about some of the male leads in Alien, Dallas and Hicks in particular. They are put in charge of situations they do not fucking want to be put in charge of.
Yeah.
And Harper was very much the same in this one. And I was like, yeah, I see a little bit of Hicks in that. I see a little bit of Dallas in that. And it always works for me. I identify with that far too much than I should, which is why I like Hicks as well.
But I think that was Matt. I think we already had that line. I just added like what Martinez was saying about like, that was the captain orders and everything, because people were like, why though, if it was supposed to be this guy, why would it not be this guy? And I'm like, well, because he doesn't have the ability, and so we need to keep Harper. But I remember like thinking the same thing you were mentioning, Aaron, because I love that trope in fiction, and I guess maybe it's true to an extent in real life. Like the best leaders, they don't want that power, they don't want to lead, but so that makes them more interesting. I guess floated, but there is that honesty I was talking about that I think you have with those characters, and for me as well, I really love that, and it just makes those characters more interesting, and like probably they have more potential with that. If they're just leaders, that's fine, but usually you'll have to have the opposite of a redeeming quality. You have to find a flow somewhere, and I think I'm glad we have that line, because I guess it set up the tone perfectly. That, and the way he talks to Unsled, like it's not we all like gonna die here, like you can take your time and everything. I think the first interactions with Mako and everything, and they're quite cool. I've seen some comments like they were pissed off that Mako was lying to him, and I was kind of intrigued by that, because I thought, well, these guys have guns, and maybe you won't say, like, yeah, just shut your ship, but we call that Tuesday in the well on Yutani.
It totally made sense that she lied to him, but it's like I said, I was glad she didn't hold on to that too long for the sake.
Yeah.
Nothing is more annoying than in fiction and in stories than when somebody holds on to a secret far too long.
Well,
and I think, yes, it worked perfectly in terms of timing with this one, which is, again, all part of why I liked her journey throughout this.
Yeah, they were fun to write together, like those talks between the missions and everything. I think I saw a lot of that, like people playing, they go through those missions. So I saw a lot of those interludes I was mentioning about. And I thought they were actually quite fun, like it feels like, I think I saw some stuff like, is this comedy, with an actual extract of the game. And I was like, maybe it's a bit of comedy in that, which is definitely not intentional, but I guess it is like, such a weird situation that, of course, Harper and Mako are a bit like strangers to. I mean, they are actual strangers, but I guess it's normal that they don't act like best buddies from the get go. Let's get
there's
some aliens.
There's a lot of yin and yang.
Yeah.
In terms of their dynamic, which was really fun. Did you ever? Sorry, Adam, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it was also interesting that Harper had this deeply personal connection to the planet that they were on, but also his ability was causing him more and more physical ailments. So while he very much wanted to step up to the plate and be a leader, and then add in the element of his daughter as well, there comes a point where he's just not capable anymore, and his Marines are like, it's okay, go to the med bay, like you need to take care of yourself, we'll figure this out. And that's when Mako kind of steps up in her role a bit more as being involved with the Marines. So that was kind of an interesting dynamic there, I thought.
Yeah, I like that as well. The fact that he's kind of disabled by the actual fact of leading, of commanding those Marines. You know, I thought it was. I mean, we ended up killing him anyway, which is sad, as you mentioned. But I really thought that was interesting to put him on the side because we usually don't see that. Especially nowadays, you know, like they were, we're like, okay, it's time for female heroes to rise, and so we'll have them, you know, inserted, presented in often the same type of way, and they skyrocket everything. And it was interesting to see the dynamic and how they kind of, you know, influence each other. And so I guess without Mako, Harper would have maybe died on the field, you know, like I mean, he wouldn't have tried that option. It didn't work out for him, but at least he tried, and I think that is something interesting, something new and probably fresher. And Mako wouldn't have, you know, earned her mistakes without, you know, the help of Jonas. So I think that was an actual nice, you know, it's almost like a romantic comedy, you know, like they bump into each other and they're changed forever in a totally different and
the odd
nihilistic
couple
context.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Did you ever think of like an in-game, in-universe reason for his, you know, empathy with the aliens? You know, from what I remember of Sea of Sorrows, it was to do with a connection with Ripley or something like that. And in the older comics, it was more alien initiated than anything. Did you guys ever have, you know,
We have
a
an
reason?
explanation like that. I don't know. I mean, did you guys read every datapad ever? That's not a challenge.
I didn't get all of them. I think I missed like one on 3 or 4 missions.
Okay, yeah. Maybe some of them didn't make the cut, but I think we actually had an explanation, and we have maybe a few lines that point in that direction, but nothing super like factual. So I'm not, you know, saying you should have caught that, Aaron. How dare you? But I think the idea was that Marlowe, or at least one of the Marlows, I don't remember the timeline quite exactly.
There was something about him doing something to Harper in hypersleep, was it?
Yeah. I mean, basically the idea was that the Whale Mutiny has unlimited access, I would say, to human resources, and those are like soldiers in hypersleep, cryosleep. I never know which one is which. Are they both correct? It's time for me to learn, guys.
I think they both
uses
been
both
used.
of them.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Glad I have you on my trying to improve my aliens game. But yeah, so he had like basically there's no shortage of soldiers that are more or less like, you know, like private military stuff. They're Marines from the USCM, but I think like in the canon, they can be pointed in the direction the way you want. So the idea was that why not make experiments in those long, massive, you know, journeys? And Harper was one of the unfortunate victims of those experiments, and one of the few who actually, you know, where they caught something. You know, Marlowe and his scientists thought, oh, maybe we have something there, you know, to explore. And I guess that's also why we have this family link of Cassandra having a link as well. Like, is this like a family genetical trait? I don't think we ended up choosing, but we really thought about, yeah, okay, certain individuals might have a better like link to that technology he was building, and maybe we'll get to explore more of that in the future. I hope so. But yeah, basically the idea was that he was victim of experiments, but it was never more than that. I'd say, you know, we didn't think about connection with other works. It was more, I guess, stuff that happened during his deployments, and the idea that I found interesting, that the way you could use soldiers as, you know, like in a very weird people are like sleeping for years, and they're like injecting stuff to them. Like that felt very sinister, and also kind of true to what happened, throughout our history, like soldiers being a kind of pets, like the opportunity of war used to try out the most sinister things you can think
All
about.
the Vietnam stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so that was very much leaning into that Cold War type of thing, as well. Like, what if we create the super soldiers that can, I don't know, talk to dolphins and intercept Russian, communications and that sort of stuff. So then it's the xenomorphs for us, but not dolphins or whatever. But yeah, that sort of ideas.
Yeah, that ability I thought was handled really well. It really reminded me of Sea of Sorrows, where it was something like, certain individuals could tune into the hive mind signal or something like that. Like, it wasn't taken as far as like the psychic ability in Starship Troopers or something. It was still kind of grounded in the alien universe, which I appreciated. But let's talk about that final mission. There's a lot going on there. So for the first time since Prometheus, we had actual space jockeys as a separate thing, not as the engineers. We were genuinely surprised that 20th Century Studios allowed that. So tell us about the decisions around that story element and the designs you went for the jockeys and for the alien Titan.
So to tell you the truth, we were just as surprised. I know we joke about it, but it wasn't as much trying to erase Prometheus as it was to explore, I guess, the original alien movies, power fantasy of imagining what were the space jockeys about, and we really wanted to tap into that. And I'm still not sure how we managed to do that, but since full disclosure, I got your question in advance, I was able to find a few clues, trying to, use my own empathic abilities about, trying to remember what came into the script and whatever. And I think the end of the game wasn't as described as the rest of the game was when I came in. So it wasn't as detailed, we don't have script per se. It's mostly dialogues and that are usually in Excel sheets with different gameplay beats described. But because of that, we kept referring, the final level as Xeno City, but there wasn't much more than that for like a long time. So I don't know if 20th was aware of it. I think they were, because we had to report to them, like send different missions and design and whatever. But I guess they they let their guard down at some point. They were like, yeah, okay, Xeno City, whatever, so you'll have xenomorphs in the city. Yeah, nothing new, right? Until it became that massive thing that we wanted to explore, because I think on Tindalos' side of things, we really wanted to have that cosmic horror feeling for the end of the game, which is a very tricky, I guess, mission, because you're not playing your Marine. So we kind of go back to the story side of things with Mako, but also we give you, I guess, what the big giant Easter egg, quite literally, like for you to kind of, be, compensated for your efforts, and it's something. Now that I think about it, is that it's not often seen in video games as well, because usually, well, less than 1% of players finish games and that sort of stuff. So you don't want to invest too much into your last level in a big moment and whatever. But in that regard, Romain and the team at Tindalos, they know to hold their like their positions, if I can use that sentence. Like, it feels very marine, but they were sure that we had to finish on that thing. And that's something I really appreciate, is that they really thought about, like, this is a franchise we have to honor, and so we have to make new things. We cannot just play on the archetypes we already saw. I mean, to an extent, that's what we do throughout the campaign. We introduce new stuff, but nothing as big as that. And so I don't know what came. I mean, what it came down to, but I guess what I'm sure of is that they loved 20th loved the design we presented to them, and to my understanding, that it was the only design we ever offered, so it didn't change much. And so you have to think giant snake, xenomorph, and they were like, okay, let's discuss it. And so basically, maybe it was like so big, not in terms of size, but in terms of concept, that they couldn't discuss it. They were couldn't say no to that. They were just like, okay, these guys are crazy, so they won't understand. They won't take no for an answer. We'll have to discuss it. I would love to talk to them about that specifically, but I suppose as well, that's another clue for you guys, because I didn't really think about that, to be honest. We were, as I said, just as surprised and relieved, frankly. But for the longest time, we thought we will never do that. Like, we have to find potentially another ending, and that was super scary to do, because the mission was written, everything made sense in terms of character arcs and everything. The structure was, I guess, pretty much okay, sound. And now there were discussion about that guy, that Xeno Titan. And I suppose maybe with the merger, things will change. Will change, sorry, for that franchise, in the same way that we have seen certain, like, One Vision enforced, for other franchise, with I don't know, Star Wars, or more recently Indiana Jones. Like, you clearly see what Lucasfilm they want to do, they want to put forward. So some people like it, some don't. Some, they find bits they like, and they make their choices, depending on the different series or movies. I guess Alien will become like that, or in I don't know what you think, how you feel about it, guys, but I guess we are on that track right now. And so I suppose maybe they wanted to try to move away from Prometheus or Covenant to build something else, uh, acknowledging that this does exist, but what if we go into that direction? And I guess maybe that's why we got a ticket, a rain check for that one. I'm not sure really how we managed to do that. It is one of life many mysteries, uh, specifically for that production. But maybe we were just at the right time with a project that wasn't big enough to scare them, but it was interesting enough to excite them, if that makes sense. So they were like, oh, maybe we can try things with a video game. Maybe that thing won't be that much of a hit or a risk. But that said, it was definitely one of the biggest validation processes we had during the production, and it started pretty late into production, so that was scary. And I know Richard, for one, who worked as motion capture coordinator, but he's also an artist, and he's super into Geiger's work. So he designed that, I think, with Sergey, and who is our artistic director, and they worked really hard to make that Titan work. And so they had to tweak very little, details. Probably the creature didn't change that much, but there were a few details that got changed. I don't remember quite exactly what, but at one point they said, okay, it is green lit. But I remember that when I was not working at Tindalos, I had Sergey saying, okay, what can you tell me about that Titan? How does that function? How could we justify this and that? And I love working with him because he had just like Romain, he had a very storytelling sensibility. He wants to the design to make sense. And I think it did, because it ended up, being green lighted. So I'm super glad about that. But I know at some point our producers were saying we have to think of something else, and I know that 20th had offered, alternatives to speed up the process, because if you take something that already exists, you don't have to go through the validation. It already exists. It's okay to use it. So basically, an Empress or that sort of stuff. But it felt like not cheating, but like, guys, this is a difficult game. People have survived the campaign. They need like a gift, a good send off, and I think that could be it. And so we created that Titan for that, the city as well. When I was working on the project, I actually went to Gruyere in Switzerland and visited the museum they have there, and I saw like one of the first painting they have was actually a city in Geiger style, so it doesn't look like a city at all. But I remember, taking a picture and sending it to the team, like maybe we could make that the city. I think in the end, it was so difficult to validate every corridor, every asset we have in that level, that it was definitely not worth it. I think every producers with the right mind would have said, no. But at Tindalos, we do things differently, I guess.
I'm so glad you did.
Thank you.
You suffered through it. Sorry, should I say? Because that mission was so satisfying, especially from a visual point of view. You saying you'd gone to the museum and everything. That background, all the city being shown off, it was like, yes, this is Giga, and in a lot of ways. And I'm curious to know if it came up, especially from how are you pronouncing the developer's name? Sorry, the director's name.
Romain.
Okay.
Yeah, or Roman if you put it like in English. But
I'm curious to know if he ever really talked about Destroying Angels, the comic, because a lot of it is like walking through some of the panels in that, which was very Giga sort of.
I mean, that I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised, because he has absorbed so many things from those comics. So we worked so like in so intensely on that mission. It felt like, because I wrote in chronological order as well, it was pretty late into production. Like, I think the game was already announced and we already had like the first two, no, maybe only the first trailer. But we were like, this game will come out in like 5 or 4 months, and we didn't validate this thing. How can we, that's scary, that's actual, like, that was an actual risk. But to I mean, it's a real testimony. I don't think that's the idiom, but anyway, like, it goes to show like how strong like the his vision was, and how strong our vision was, because I never felt like, oh, that's he want to recreate this panel, so guess now we have to make it. But it was very much like, yeah, this is sick, this is insane. I think I heard it's like the first original xenomorph since Covenant. I mean, you guys will be able to correct me, but I think I heard that from people, maybe on a screen, maybe comics, they did something cool in between. But
yeah, I think we had the alpha and those weird fucking centipede things from Marvel.
Yeah. I didn't check that. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we had the Titan, and it's interesting as well as being the first jockey alien we've had for a long time
since that comic.
Infestation.
I think,
maybe Infestation had one.
Oh, you're right. Okay,
with the
but
big trunk.
That comic, Apocalypse: The Destroying Angels, is a favorite of mine as well as Aaron's. So I definitely recommend checking that out, because there are a number of parallels beyond just the biomechanical city. Even the motivations of like kind of the main antagonist are a little bit of a parallel there. He's like, how can we coexist with the alien? Because eventually the alien will just be everywhere, so we need to find a way that we can live among them. And the cult kind of had a more sinister take of that, but it was it's some interesting comparisons, so I definitely recommend checking that out.
Cool.
But as a fan that has been a fan for a long time, it was really cool to see something that felt more like older expanded universe, like those early days when we had played AVP2. They had these end levels where you would explore the space jockey facility. They would call it like the pilot race in that game, and it really just brought me back there as a fan, and I like miss that feeling. The prequels, they've been divisive among fans. I mean, some fans love them, some fans have complicated feelings about them, like myself. So to see something that felt more in line with the original films, in terms of that more Lovecraftian depiction, it was really cool to see that again.
I guess we're not called Tindalos for nothing, and like obviously the original team that Robin, I mean, he and his partner is there. They are massive fans of that sort of horror and existential dread. Sorry, and we really wanted to. I mean, I didn't read that comic, and I guess maybe for the better, because I didn't want it to do the exact same thing. I mean, if I did by mistake, I guess I can stay. It's just a mistake, I didn't do it, on purpose. But when he started to talk about that Xeno City and the course we wanted to strike, for that level, it made sense to me, because of the common references we had regarding maybe Lovecraftian horror, or maybe, that original scene with the space jockey. And so I guess you have to imagine that I guess he lived with that idea for entire years, and it is now not an idea but more like a feeling. So I'm glad that we were able to give that feeling to you guys, and actually to put you back a few like a few years from that, because it's just such a powerful thing, and I myself, I have complicated feelings with Prometheus and Covenant, but it was just always so interesting to see a vision on that universe. And to go back to the original or the first question about how did I discover Alien, when I started watching those movies, I thought it was an actual anthology. So I thought those were the rules, like you have to do your take on a movie, and who cares if it cancel the thing that came before, or it changes. It's how beautiful it is. So I guess I can understand why people are kind of sad it didn't came out as good as they wanted it to be, those two movies. But it's, in a sense, like I always felt of them as one iteration, on that specific concept. And our example with Dark Descent shows that I guess nowadays it is possible to have maybe multiple versions on the same idea. I guess it doesn't have to be, contradictory. Maybe it can, coexist. But I feel like it was a privilege to work on such a. It feels tiny at the scale of the game and everything that I had to work on, because it's mostly artists that made that thing work. I had nothing to do with it, but it just feels good to, maybe if one day I see like a figure of that thing, I'll say, yeah, I remember this guy. I'd love to see that. And I love to. I mean, it's just like I have to pinch myself. When I started, I didn't really touch on that, but it became a job. Like I really wanted to be the best thing every day, in terms of writing, in terms of giving ideas. But I really never thought about how people will react to that. I just thought about how was I reacting to stuff. And when they said, we will end this game in the Xeno City, and I was like, tell me more. I need to know more. What does it look like and everything. And so when they invited me kind of in the project, and to exchange ideas and that. It's just such a massive privilege. And sometimes I realize it when I hear you guys, when I see people talking about that on the internet and on social media. I'm just like, hey, it's true, we did that, and I guess I talk a lot about the validation process, but I should talk way more about how people validated that for us, receiving that Xenotitan as well as they received it.
I thought it was cool that it went in a very different design direction, especially I think Adam, you'd pointed this out as well. It reminded me of some takes on the jockeys being these creatures without legs, and I don't think it's anything we'd ever seen in any official sort of medium. But when the Titan rocked out with a massive tail, I was like, yep, I know what they're doing here, and this is interesting. So yeah, that was really cool.
I love the mandibles. Is that the word also in
yes,
English? Like that. Yeah. I love them. Just so frightening.
So one of the things I was intrigued about from the very sort of start of the game was the Cerberus protocol. So I'm a little unclear on the specifics here. This might have been logs I missed, so you're going to have to clarify this for me again, because very early on I was thinking, the company's got to know there's aliens on Lethe to put this in place. So the logs in the final mission sort of mentioned that they'd known about the Xeno City, the Jockey City, for some time. So was Cerberus something that was put into place after the discovery of the city and the egg? Yeah, okay. So it was containment protocol with the knowledge of the aliens already being there.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, but Cerberus was one of the. If we want to elaborate on that, I don't want to step on your on your toes, guys. But basically, it was one of the tough things we had to work on, because it one of the assignments, like a feedback, like this isn't clear. So I'm not surprised that it feels still a bit blurry. To be fair, we wanted to leave room for interpretation and stuff in the data pads, because I think that's the beauty of video games. Like when you have stuff like that, you can always put a few data pads and put the all explaining the stuff, but we try to be careful with that and not to hammer your head with exposition put in different places. But I learned a hard lesson working on servers in particular, is you have to map out everything, because if you don't know about your plan, I guess it will not work out for your players as well. At first, when they ask about, can you make that clearer, I was like, nah, it's fine, it's your typical nuke satellite doomsday clock, who cares. And then I realized it's hard to people to understand the plans of the Wei, so we have to understand why they put that in place. And so if you corroborate the different data pads together, I think what you discover is that, to put it simply, there were families trying to go back to Conrad and that sort of, literature, families of pioneers going on Lethe, trying to find Trimonite. I don't remember how it is pronounced.
Trimonite. Yeah.
Trimonite, right. Okay. I got it right. So they wanted to find that, and actually came across that city, probably dive deeper than they should have. And I think the different data pads mentioned different families, and one of them were like, okay, let's cash out, let's call the Wei, they'll take care of everything, I don't want anything to do with that. And another, like they betray themselves, which is kind of work out for the Wei, because they bought the whole thing back and became interested in what they had found, but didn't understand the full extent, I guess, of their discoveries. So it took years for them to understand what they found, and Marlowe helped them in that regard. But officially, the Cerberus was put together, I think, because of the uprising we mentioned in the background of Lethe. They were like, oh, we cannot have people flying around the spaceships and doing nothing, so we'll put the satellites, nothing to worry about. And that's the official version, and in fact, it's the idea is that they can nuke everything from orbit and wait if things don't work out the way they want to. And what I really wanted to do is to show that they don't operate at human level. They're not saying, oh, if I don't do this or that, they can wait. They have money, they have the corporation, they can actually bought you back, take a little bit of yourself, for years. And so that was that, but on the world and almost galactic scale, like, well, if it doesn't work out, the city is safe, it's underground, we nuke everything, clean state, we come back in a few years, nobody will know about its frontier world, will say that a bad storm happened or whatever. So the idea was to protect the not from the people on the planet, but probably people who might be interested in what is on the planet, like, I don't know, the Union of Progressive People, competitors, everybody you can imagine, and potentially now they have an opportunity to erase every proof and nuke them from orbit, as it is the only way, to be sure, right? So that was basically what went through my mind when I started to write or iron out the Cerberus protocol. But the funny thing is that I had to actually open like a very old document of mine when I started working. So thank you for allowing me to revisit those memories with different ideas that end up being completely, different in the release version. But that it's always fun to see how, the different step we took.
It's interesting about the Cerberus protocol that it would be a way to stop other entities from getting their hands on the alien if the alien had become too widespread on the planet. Like, I hadn't thought of that, but it makes a lot of sense given that, Weyland-Yutani wants the alien all for themselves. So if it had gotten to this point where it was just everywhere, that they would just eliminate that possibility.
Cool. I'm glad you dig it.
Another character that we haven't really mentioned yet was Major Theo Stern, who, when Harper kind of goes out of commission, he joins up with Mako's character, and he also has a similar dynamic to Harper of the, having to fight who were your people before, So it was kind of interesting to see them join together. I mean, it was mainly for the last bit of the game, but I still feel like he was a solid secondary character, and if there ever was a sequel or something, we'd probably see more of him.
I think character-wise, the game did a very good job of working everybody. That last mission when Martinez and Stern, joined Mako. I mean, to be fair,
we wouldn't see more of him because he was
I didn't want to make you extra sad, and then after Opera, I was like,
wait, he died too. Yes, okay. Never mind.
Oh yeah, to be fair, when that cutscene started and it was just those three, I was a little bit pissed off because I was like, you know what, my guys have just gone through all this fucking hassle to get this landing site sorted, and I don't get to go down there. But it was super satisfying to actually, from a a narrative, an investment point of view, to see them all three show up together and go down there in support of, again, Harper, in support of another character. Everything just came together really well in terms of cast and character. The actors were brilliant, the performance was brilliant, and it was just a satisfying collection of characters, and the way the narrative just sort of wrapped up around there. It just worked really well. I found it really satisfying from that point of view.
Cool. It was a difficult sell, to say that you will have to imagine your Marines fighting all the way, like up there, and you're actually stuck with those named characters that we have. I love Stern. I was actually sad that we had to let him go. I mean, Harper, I think it was always kind of planned that we had to actually bid him farewell, but it's just like the character of Stern, of and elaborating on that theme of nobody is actually quite in the archetype that you would expect. So when you see a Newtonian employee, it's a white collar type of executive, like she's an introvert, and you have like this surgeon that is super badass, but he has like weird past. He's holding stuff on, for himself. And then you see the corporate soldier, like private military type of guy, and he's actually quite smooth and I guess kind of honest. Like he's like, fuck them, like I cannot take this shit anymore. And it was so fun to write. I think it was one of the character I love to write the most. He has this thing when he meet up with the Marines, right? And Harper has to talk to him, and that was the most difficult scene to do because we had no cutscenes, and I was like, I really want this character to be interesting, and I was super sad that we had to let him go because I felt like we didn't see as much of him as I wanted. But I have ideas, maybe he could come back, or maybe we could do, I don't know, like a prequel of some sorts with him, because I think it would be interesting to be on their side, on the Tony side, and diving into that also, like a paramilitary, kind of experience that I think the franchise already has, like, and kind of has since Aliens. And I thought like it would be interesting to be in the boots of mercenaries and have a squad of them, leading a squad of them. So yeah, we had stuff like that planned, but it didn't really work out regarding time was of the essence, and we had a more urgent matter to take into account. But yeah, I love him. And I'm glad that you like him. Hopefully we'll see more of him one way or the other.
I've been in the midst of packing, and it's been like a week since I've completed that game, so I can't believe, like, oh yeah, he did die, that's right. But that Titan alien took them out. That Titan alien took them out so quickly. It was like in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, but that was also a collective decision. Like at some point we were thinking, well, they all have to die basically, right? Because it was, I think at first we wanted opportunities for the player to save them, and then I thought it would be weird if we ever make a sequel and like we have to take that into account, and we're not BioWare and we're not mass affecting that thing, so it would have been interesting to write from different perspectives. Did you save that guy or not? But it was, I guess, another challenge on the play that we didn't want to have. And then we thought, what would be the most interesting way to kill them? And basically we're like, in a snap, like if we want to, what we want to sell at that point is the new Xeno, so it has to shred them to pieces. Stern, I think we kept it very often open, so we, like, he's pushed. I remember, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so maybe he's still alive somewhere.
So maybe it's my head canon. He's a tough guy. He survived, but Martinez definitely was a snack for that Titan. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I guess Cassandra. Maybe we'd learn more about her. But it's interesting what you said about seeing the mercenary perspective, because you said that and I was like, oh, that would be such a cool DLC idea. Like you play as the Weyland-Yutani mercenaries and you see their base and everything. Like, so yeah,
that was actually my idea. I actually thought about that and talked about it with Romain, but I don't know if we will end up doing it. But I think he was just like you, digging the idea.
Were there any other story elements that were dropped from the game that you really wish would have made it into the final release?
So it might sound a bit weird after what I just said, but in terms of story elements per se, I think no, we did everything we wanted to do, except for that, like a Stern thing, for instance. But we worked on marketing elements and other stuff that didn't see the light of day, unfortunately. So, like for instance, at some point, Romain asked if I could write a script for like the reveal trailer, and I thought that was like coming from a marketing background, because that's what I studied. I was blown away by the opportunity, because I think a good trailer is almost like a work of art unto itself. You could actually make something that is sometimes even better than the final product. And so we discussed about what we could do for that reveal trailer. Sadly, it was, I guess, too expensive, and the deadline was too short. But the idea was, it was basically a mix of shots, of cool shots, trying to kind of sell the idea that this wasn't an FPS. And I think sadly we didn't manage to do that during marketing, because a lot of people were thinking it's another shooter, or it's a twin stick shooter, whatever. And so basically we had vehicles, we had like massive environments that you have in the game, and nothing misleading or whatever. And you had a voiceover of Marlowe giving a speech to his followers, and we were finishing with like almost like an army shot, or a lair shot of him and his goons, and you like have the reveal of the weird enemies. And that was so fun to imagine. Even now, I still have it in my mind, and I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. We didn't manage to do that, but for the little anecdote, is like I think there is a data pad with that speech in the game. So I actually just copy pasted. This is my confession today, but I copy pasted the script, and the speech is actually in the game in another form, but it's a speech that he sent to his school. So yeah, there was stuff like that we really wanted to explore, like have a very different kind of promotion for a very different kind of alien game, and that was very near and dear to my heart because of my marketing background. And also, I know 20th was interested at some point making tie-ins, so like maybe comics, I suppose, Marvel comics. As a comic book fan, and I'm still trying to work on my own stuff in that regard, but I would have loved to write that sort of stuff. And I remember pitching like 3 or 4 stories. So I think there was a Marlowe story, the Darwin Era, story. Also pitches for Stern and Harper. I don't know what happened to those. They might, they never mentioned like, okay, we're gonna do this or that. But at some point, they had like a real curiosity for the project and asked if we could find, little things that were in the game, but that would be a great way to expand on its lore and everything. I would have loved to. I don't know if someone ever actually did that. Like you actually the writer of the game, but you also write on the tie-in. I would have loved to write with on another person with something. But that would be great. I think they did it with the Star Wars games, but it's not the writers for the games. It's actually different writers. I mean, of course you have to be professional about it. It's a very different job, but it would have been lovely to work with the comic book artist and try to find the best way to expand on Dark Descent.
From our perspective as well, like there have been some video game tie-ins for us, like Fireteam had a prequel, but there's always, because of the chaotic nature of your experience, writing the game and stuff like that, there's an obvious disconnect between the two that make it not as satisfying from from our experience. So actually having somebody who was writing the game, actually being able to do a tie-in would have made for a more cohesive experience that probably would have been more satisfying to us.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's my experience as well. I used to spend euros on those ties and everything I could read about, and it always felt like kind of weird. And I don't know. I don't understand why they don't do that, because it's usually, I think, something that could be solved in a few meetings. And also, I guess it would feel great. I have a massive respect for those IPs and for the ideas of expanding universes, and but it feels like we want to make them because we have to make them, but we don't really know how to make them anymore. It's just like there is this very, oh yeah, we have to do tying thing. So in a way, maybe it's good that it didn't see the light of day, but I would have loved, and I would have, I guess, petitioned Tindalos style to be involved in that regard, and it would have been cool. Like, I think really that there are more stories to tell on Leafy and what happened there. So I guess
Well,
in comic book form, that would have been great.
that leads us on to the next question as well, because while the game has a very satisfying close, with the rescue of Cassandra, it leaves a lot of threads, in regards to her importance, in regards to the world of Lethe, because you built it. The game had such fantastic world building. It made a giant world and lots of characters and lots of stuff. And yeah, again, Cassandra's sort of importance, the threads of her importance are left very open at the end of it. So something a lot of people asked us to ask you was the possibility of of more content, the topic of a sequel or future DLC. Had that been talked about at Tindalos?
We did talk about it, like, among ourselves, like at Tindalos. So because it's a very tricky territory we enter here, also try my best. But long story short, we have ideas for more, and because Adam gave the idea, I was able to jump on that thing about the DLC with the corporate, like the actual militia from the Wii U. So that was one of the things that I mentioned to him. I actually talked about like a I guess an informal pitch for a sequel, and he and his brother Tristan, who's also one of the game designer on the game, they loved it, and I thought like we have a real opportunity to kind of create again something different if we start from there. So I won't spoil the surprise if in a reality or the other, it ended up happening. That would be great. But 20th was, at least to the extent of my knowledge, was never in the loop. So that was just us dreaming. I know also Romain had a great idea on, come on, I switched back to French, but yeah, he has a great idea to, I guess, not improve, but expand upon the gameplay to have like a DLC with a slight, different take on what we could do with that. And so we actually found that now that we have our different assets and I guess a method of building those levels, it would be great to try to use different genres, more or less characters, like in your squad, that sort of stuff. So I think the game design matrix that the guys created is very powerful, and but also very flexible. We could imagine very different things. Sadly, as I mean, my understanding is that nothing has been discussed officially yet. Before the games, I know that before the game release, sorry, I know that there were no plans for it for more, simply because they are super protective of the IP, and there are plenty alien works in the making and planned for you guys already. So I understand why they do it, and on our side, we're just already so happy to have done that. That if it has to stop there, it will stop there, and we'll be very proud of what we do. But it's sure that we have a special I guess, position in regard of the genre we represent, like strategy game. Like they probably have great games planned for sure. I don't think many of them will be strategy games. So hopefully, maybe we found our little niche that we can, explore. But I guess your best bets is probably to campaign for us now, because if you love the game and you say it on, I don't know, social media, Steam or whatever, we will probably help our chances. Maybe it won't happen, right now, because as I mentioned, there is plenty of things planned for Alien, and I think it's actually for you guys it must be very, very good, because I remember being a journalist at the time when Star Wars came back, and I think it's super exciting to see, and we have a new movie, a new series, new games.
If there was much news and much marketing, yes,
it would. Yeah. For now, it's very, very shy, right?
Yeah, I mean,
there's a lot coming though, and Prey was really good as well. So
cool.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what's come? I might sort of grumble a little bit about the fact that I didn't really get much press or marketing sort of communication with this game, and there might not have been much press around Prey or what have you, but the end results have been fucking good.
Yeah.
So,
as long as it's in that sense, I think that's fine. Because sometimes you have massive promotion and it's a letdown,
Yeah.
So we'll see. So far, I guess so good. I keep my hopes up, because it would be, frankly, it would be sad if we not, one way or another try to together with 20th to find a way to make that game even bigger with I don't know, an extension or something else. Or the sequel would be great, because I'm very excited by the ideas we discussed together at Tindalos. But it's always like that, you're like, you're writing, and it's like, so, it's a joy. It's also a job, and then it takes a toll on your creativity, and you're like, okay, now we can actually breathe. The thing is done. And suddenly you start to miss, like the Marines and that universe. So I would, on my side of things, I would sign for it in an instant, because especially since I can be there from the beginning to the end, because I wasn't the first time. So maybe that's why I'm so enthusiastic about it. Others are like grizzled veteran. They have PTSD from the production. They're trapped in that room of the Otego. They don't want to leave. But me, I'll be down for another mission for sure.
So that's actually everything. We're all tapped out, but before we let you exfil back to the Otago, is there anything else you'd like to say, any anecdote or thought that we just haven't given you the opportunity to express with our questions?
Yeah, actually, as you may have noticed, the game is dedicated to the memory of Lucille, our friend and colleague. She suffered from mental health problems, sadly. I did too. I still do to an extent. And so I promised myself that every time I could say something about it, I would say something about it, because if you suffer from the same things, or perhaps, I don't know, depression or anxiety, or even, suicidal thoughts, sorry, bad English, but please reach out. That's what you have to remember, like whether you are suffering from one or the other. I remember a time where communities just like yours guys was like, and the passion you entertain for them, and for those big universities that really helped me out when I needed. So I would love fan over the world of Alien and other stuff, but to continue to offer that sort of support that I was lucky to have. And so basically mental health is important. That's what I wanted to say. And hopefully with the help of massive communities of fans will help a lot of people around the world.
Completely agree. I mean, it's not something I really talk about on the show, but it's something I also struggle with, and it's a huge help to come on and do these things like this as well. It might be a little bit of a struggle after the fact with the polish and everything, But just to come on and nerd out with folk is a way to kind of get through some of that.
Yeah. I mean, I
connection.
definitely relate to that, and that's why I kind of wanted to end on that note. It's a bit of a like weird thing to end up the podcast, but it's always good to hear that people don't have usually an opportunity to talk about that. So I'm glad that we have it, and so if people watching us have it as well, just reach out, and I'll be happy to maybe talk to you on Twitter or everywhere else to find a bit of support and help you out through the day and whatever sadly sometimes make it darker. So hopefully the game and everything we mentioned together, thank you guys again, help out. And thank you very much for inviting me for this opportunity to defend our little game, as I said, but it's a massive game. I have to say it right now. I can say it with you guys. You'll forgive me for this.
It's bigger than a little game.
It's bigger, yeah.
But if folks want to find you, you mentioned you're on Twitter, or?
Yes, my Twitter handle is if Twitter or still exists by the time
But the way Threads is going, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's if you type my name, you'll find me. But otherwise, the handle is Republique, and just like Republic, but not IC at the end. It's free K, because I was very young when I chose that name, and it got kind of stuck with me, and it has a nice ring to it. Nobody has it, so it's fine. I'll keep it for a while at least.
And that'll be in the post that goes along with the podcast. It'll be in the video description as well, cool. For folk who are too lazy to type that out. No, it's not laziness. It's called good journalism. That's what it is.
Exactly.
But thank you. Very much appreciate you joining us, and we'll sort out something extra for folk.
All right. Well, we hope you all enjoyed our discussion with Thibaut Claudel.
Very much was a discussion rather than an interview as such, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I thought it was just, again, really fun to.
It was great talking to
him with him. Yeah. Just because that game played around with the lore in such interesting ways. So I'm very much looking forward to another playthrough on that. As always, we appreciate you checking us out, and if you enjoy our podcast, it really does help us out to leave any comments or reviews and feedback on the various platforms you use. By the time this goes up, we'll probably have also launched our Patreon. So if you'd like to help support us in other ways as well, please check that out for your consideration. You can. Sorry, you were going to say something, Aaron?
And we'll also be having Thibaut back for a part 2. Obviously, because this was a 2-hour-long thing, there was extra questions on there from the community that we didn't get a chance to ask. So we're going to be sorting out another discussion with Thibaut, whether it's on a live stream, whether we do another episode. We couldn't quite decide what we were doing, but we're going to be having him back on for fans to have a chance to put their questions to Thibaut directly.
Yep, and very much looking forward to that. And hopefully we get more content for Dark Descent announced sometime soon. So maybe he'll have a bit more to talk about if that story continues. You can always find us on our website as well, avpgalaxy.net, and we are on all the major socials: Facebook, Instagram, the new Threads, and X, as it's called now. Which is very ridiculous still. It's weird even to say that. But so again, thank you for checking us out. And until next time, this has been Adam Zeller
and Aaron Percival
signing off.